So let's take a look at another data type in the Ruby language called the array. An array is just a list of values or a list of objects, and it's a great way for managing multiple objects at the same time. So you could think of, for example, if you've got a website and you've got 100 or 1,000 users in your database that subscribe to your website, you may need to reach into the database and do something with all of those usernames or something like that. And so that's where an array would come in handy. We would pull out all of those users and store them inside of an array. So let's take a look at creating arrays. Make sure you are in your practice.rb file. And what we're going to do is just execute on that file. So to create an array, you can do it really in two ways. You can write like this, capital A, and then write array.new. Or you could simply just put opening and closing brackets like that. And that's how you create an array. It's very simple. So Ruby can process those two ways of creating an array. So let's assign an array to a variable called array1. And we'll use the array literal form. So that's what we call the array literal form of creating it. So we've got an empty array now, and what we could do is in one step we can go ahead and add some things to an array. We can add strings, or even numbers and mix and match. We can even nest arrays within other arrays, and we can go multiple levels deep if we want. So now if I were to output this to the console, we can do that just by executing the file like this. You'll see it'll list everything out for us. Now, there are a couple of special methods that come with arrays. These are built-in functions in the Ruby language that allow us to work with the arrays and manipulate the data. And there will be several use cases for these methods down the line, so I just want to show you a few key ones. And remember, you can always navigate to this site here. So if you just Google search Ruby and array, you should find this website that's called ruby-doc.org. And you can search for their arrays and read about all of the different methods that you can kind of do. So let's take a look at a few useful ones really quick. We can add things to an array. So by using this operator here, or this method, we can now add something else to the array. So let's add the number 5, and this will add it to the end of the array. So now if we output array1, we'll see that a 5 got added to the end of the array. So likewise, we can also use a few other methods here. We can do the .push method, and then in parentheses you can put whatever you want to add to the end of the array. So we'll save that. And then if we output this to the console, save it again, and then execute the file, you'll see at the very end of the list now we have added another string. So these are getting added on to the end of this array. So in other words, if we were to print out the array, we would see that they got added on, and it looks something like this now that we've added those onto the array. And just to show that that's what it does look like, we could use print instead of puts, and it'll actually print out the actual array itself instead of showing each object in a new line. So if I save that and execute, there you go. So now our array has transformed to look like this because we used this method to add the 5 and then also the push method. Likewise, you can remove things off of the end of an array. So you could do something like this, array1.pop, and that's going to pull off the last object in an array. And so if we take a look at this now, you'll see that this last object here is no longer showing. Now keep in mind we deleted some of that other stuff, and so the array currently looks like this. Every time we execute the Ruby file, it's going to look like this unless we have more code in here to add things to it. So, and then a few more methods. You can also do unshift to add something to the beginning of an array. We'll use print this time. There you go. Now we've added something to the front of the array. And likewise, you can pull something off the front of the array just by doing shift. We'll do it on a new line. There we go. We just pulled off that name Adam there from the front of the array. So there are going to be times when you need to access certain parts of the array. So for example, you might need to access the second object in the array, and we want to see what's in there. So when you're working with an array full of, maybe like 100 or 1,000 users or something like that, this is where it's going to be really helpful to be able to access a particular element inside of an array. And the way we do that is pretty simple. You can imagine that each element in this array has an assigned number. And instead of starting from 1, it starts from 0. So for example, in this array, John is occupying slot number 0. This string here, Mary, is occupying slot number 1. This number 3 here is occupying slot number 2. And then this nested array here is occupying slot number 3. And so we can see this in action by doing this kind of a notation right here. We do this bracket notation. And so if I output this to our console, this will translate into whatever is sitting in the first slot of the array. Right? So if I go puts and then I execute this file, you'll see we got John back. So this is how we access the array. We just put a bracket and then the number inside of it. And remember, we always start from 0. So if I want to grab the last item, which is just a nested array here, I could do that by counting up 0, 1, 2, 3. And now if I save that and run it, we'll get back whatever's in that final slot here, which is the nested array. Now, just a few more helpful methods. You could also do array.first just to see what's in the first element of first slot of the array. So you could even use this method .last to see what's in the last part of the array. And there you go. It's outputting this nested array. So those are a few helpful methods when working with arrays.